Hey everybody, this is Perch, and hopefully you got a chance to check out Joe Corallo and I talking about Hush. As we mentioned in the video, this is a storyline that ran in Batman that is in many people's minds the quintessential best Batman story. As Joe and I walk through, and it's our opinion, it doesn't need to be yours. The story is painful, but what cannot be denied is that, first of all, you had a superstar artist on it in Jim Lee, and the sales impact of the book. We briefly touched on that video. Now I want to take you through exactly what happened with the sales numbers month by month and why this is. First of all, what lessons does that teach us that we could learn from today that actually point out how things can work without a lot of gimmicks and just kind of really highlight what happens when you have a very successful series? Because regardless of whether I personally enjoyed the story or not, I would be a fool to say this wasn't a huge success and DC should clone it 800 times if they could. So let's take a look through this series, which launched in October of 2002. It ran through September of 2003. It kept a very consistent, nice schedule through the entire thing. It was 12 issues, and it ran on time every month. We'll get into more of that a little bit later. But let's take a look. So obviously this was Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee. Jeff Loeb doing the writing for the book, Jim Lee doing the art, Scott Williams on inks, and really just an all-star team in terms of the art, the coloring, everything looked pretty top-notch. Hush would go on, of course, to spawn a movie. It would sell tons and tons of trades. In fact, so many trades, special editions, collected versions, that it's almost impossible to give you an accurate number of how well the trades and things have sold. But to give you kind of an indication, I won't show this picture here, but if you go to Amazon and you look at the best-selling graphic novels, best-selling books, what you'll find is that the monthly sales of Hush today, in 2021, far exceed anything that's been done in recent memory, with the exception right now of Three Jokers. But Hush often has stronger numbers than Watchmen on Amazon. Now, keep in mind, Watchmen has had also several volumes and everything else. And my strong belief is that if you put the two up together, I do suspect Watchmen has sold more copies than Hush. But the fact that it's kind of a debatable thing that, we're not quite sure of indicates the power of this book. Watchmen's obviously had a huge marketing campaign, lots of stuff behind it. Hush is, in terms of sales, talked about in the same universe, so that's a big deal. But this title basically, when it debuted in October 2002, it debuted at 120,945. And what is true is that retailers were underprepared for the strength of this book. They ordered strong because Jim Lee is on it, but I think there was a lot of belief that the title would not ship on time, that it would experience heavy delays. Marvel was experiencing plenty of delays around this time and would continue to with things like the Ultimates and other books that were coming out. But at the moment, this was seen as who doesn't like Jim Lee? But retailers were slightly timid, I would say. It's weird to say slightly timid when you're talking about 120,000 copies, but as you can already see visually from the graph, things would go up from here. So the second issue did drop. It went down to 101,000, and that's to be expected. Keep in mind, retailers are ordering issue 2 and issue 3 really before they knew what was going to happen with issue 1. Issue 1 promptly sold out, and retailer demand was really, really huge. And I don't have the reprint numbers here. We do not have reliable numbers. This is a problem. But the reprint numbers on particularly issue 608 through 611 were extremely high and probably boosted this comic up into the 180s when all was said and done. But 609 dropped. 610 went back up to 117, and some of this was based on early interest. So retailers were starting to get a sense of kind of last minute, put this on my pull list right before the first issue, 608, came out. And so you saw the numbers start to rise. And then you see a steady but growing amount. The fourth issue in this series, issue 611, got to 129. We've now gone higher than where it launched. Very unusual, of course, for comics. And then issue 612, which promised to have Superman in it as well, went to 145. And I think the strength of having Superman in the book is what boosted it just a little bit higher. It was really clear at this point that it wasn't just Batman, having a Killer Croc kind of adventure, that they really were going to showcase a lot of different things in the DC universe. Keep in mind when this book went out, the amount of marketing that people didn't believe that this was going to be a good tour de force of a lot of the biggest and best within the DC universe. And the first couple issues start out certainly with Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Killer Croc, But it was about the time you got to issue 612 that it really became apparent we were going to see everybody in this thing. So, issue 613, again, it dropped from that appearance of Superman, but it was still growing. So if you look at it from issue 611, it went from 129 to 133. And then we get the Joker, who's obviously a big iconic villain, and that also boosted some sales up in issue 614 to 153. So we're over the 150 mark. But just look at the trend. Everything is slowly but surely going up. You have a little bit of bumps there, but by and large, it's going up. And then issue 615 was back down to 143. Again, it's hard to say back down. It's still 140. It's a high number, and we saw things were fairly stable. The Raja Ghul, maybe some of the more detective elements kept us around the mid 140s for a while, leading to issue 618 of 149. This is a penultimate issue, promising kind of a big return of Jason Todd. It didn't deliver that. I mean, it was a trick, and I think a lot of people understood that. And then finally, issue 619, the final issue, soars to 235. And it's a little bit unclear why it went up, other than it was the big conclusion. It was going to reveal the mystery. Who was Hush? Things were at a fever pitch. Keep in mind that, again, reprints were very strong. I started to grab the reprints for this analysis, and what I just quickly found was that we didn't have solid data. There was a lot of missing data, and so the picture was going to look false no matter what I did. So I chose instead to opt out and just showed you this is first run, first order, what we got. But anecdotally, the reprints got us into the 160s to 180s territory for the majority of the entire run, and in some cases, as it went on, built it still higher. I think the last couple issues, 618, the Joker 614, probably boosted above 200,000 copies when you count in the reprints, from what I could tell. So overall, this is a very strong picture, and it's key. We started at 120,000, we end up at 235. This is huge growth for this series, and if we throw a trend line in here from start to finish, issue 1 to issue 12, we're at 106,000 to 180,000, and that gives us a 70% increase over the course of this run, which is when you're not going to hear this again. What does this say? I feel very confident to say this is not a number you're going to see again on this channel, probably ever. But a 70% increase over the course of the run is that's not a smashing success. That's that's a ludicrous success. That's millions of dollars are being made, and probably being made for someone. I have no idea what kind of royalties and other things are being paid on this, but suffice to say, I'm sure that Jim Lee in particular, and probably Jeff Loeb as well, have made more money off Hush than many creators will make during their entire career for everything. But here's something else you're never going to see again, I think. That last issue spiked sales up. So you know how oftentimes in the trend lines I'll take out the first issue just to give you a sense of what happens when you take out the maybe artificially boosted first issue. So when was the last time you saw this? Let me take out the last issue. The run is so strong. We're actually going to take out that last issue and show you this trend. Just going from 608 to 618, 106 to 150. And you get a 42% increase. So again, you get a huge increase over the course of this series, even not counting that final issue. And that's incredible. So if you want to, though, take a look at, what does this mean in the broader perspective? How well was this comic doing coming in? Because one of the comments I get all the time is like, well, you show these strong comics, but, Batman, everybody's buying Batman. Batman's a top 10 character always. So, what does it really matter? Is it worth paying Jim Lee to come on this? I mean, God, you must have given him a lot of money. Couldn't have been worth it. Batman's going to sell no matter who's on it. Well, not really. So take a look at this picture. This is the 6 issues before Hush and the 6 issues after. So this tells us many different stories. First off, the title was selling around 48 to, kind of mid 40,000s was what Batman was doing before Jim Lee came on. And this wasn't like a cherry-picked 6 issues. I can go back several years. This was pretty constant. Batman would sell in the mid-40s during this time period. Every now and then bump up a little bit, but this is really where it was at. Jim Lee coming on caused things to double, basically right out the gate. More than double, triple, right out the gate. And then after that team left, and obviously Jim Lee is a huge name, he's going to bring a lot of people to the comic, and that's going to be a really big deal. Look at what happened to the sales. So to get rid of that last 235, number, and instead remember our second to last issue there. That was selling at 149,000 copies. Okay, so it goes down from 149,000 copies down to 107. Okay, so basically 150 to 100. Keep it simple. So that was definitely a drop, but I mean, you're losing Jim Lee off the title. You undoubtedly got a much cheaper art team and everything else on it. So it's a drop, but it's a much smaller drop than the increase that the title had from before the issue started. So we basically went from 45 to 120. We had a tripling of what was happening, and we had a third lose when it was over. This is good news. It's insanely good news, and you do see the numbers start to taper down here. But what Batman does is it finds itself kind of stabilizing around the mid 80s. If you then again draw this picture out 2, 3, 4 years, you'll have other teams come on. Obviously, eventually you get to the New 52, and many years later. But the idea that Batman kind of coasts around at the mid 80s is where the title sat. And so we basically went from a title that was selling in the mid 40s to making it be in the mid 80s ongoing. So by any estimation, bringing Jim Lee on, paying him the money, having this focused event where we could do this, it put so much strength into the title that it added about 40,000 unit sales, about 40,000 units to the title after they were gone. And I can't stress this enough. The other piece here, and I mentioned in the other video, is there was no reboot. There was no number one. There was no jumping on point or jumping off point. You get a guy like Jim Lee in to do a series like that. He starts with issue 608. They don't do any. There's no double-sized issue. There's no special fanfare. There's nothing like that. It's just issue 608, same cover price as issue 607, same page count, just rolling it out. Huge strength to the comic. And I would make this picture presents a really strong argument that when you relaunch your title, when you bring on a new creative team, you do new number one, you have a lot of it's more likely you're going to lose people than gain people. If they say at the end of his run at 619, they basically ended the title, and 620 was a brand new number one issue. Well, that new number one issue would sell higher, undoubtedly, because it's a number one. It would sell higher, but it as we've seen from almost every other video I put up here on the numbers, it drops very quickly too. This is no special edition, no limited series, no number one issue, nothing, right in the comic. And look what it does to the strength of the before and the after. This is what comic companies need to do. This is just smart business. If we look a little bit further, what happened with the comic in terms of where it was at in terms of sales? So before Hush, the title was in the 24, 18, 26, 21, 30, 32. What you're looking at here is the ranking of where these comics were at. Where did it appear against all the other comics? Jim Lee coming out of the book, the very first issue he did was the number one selling book of the number one shipping book of the month. And it held. Most of it was all in the, outside of that second issue he was on, outside of issue 609, everything was in the top 3. And then after Jim Lee leaves, the title remains, issue 7, it then drops to 10th. It's still in the top 15. So if we look at, basically over this 8-issue run, 8 copies of it, 8 of the 12 were the number one comic of the month. And only 1 issue was outside the top 5. And before Hush, Batman was consistently selling in the mid-20s. And after Hush, Batman consistently sold in the top 15. Once again, you bring on a strong artist, you put a focused story, you take a little tour through Gotham, and you get a top-selling book that holds. Even after that team is gone, you've improved the book. I mentioned at the beginning, every issue of the 12-issue run shipped on time, no schedule delays. Here you see it, just like clockwork. People like consistency. Overall, there's no doubt that Batman Hush was one of the most successful runs in modern comics, required no reboot or relaunch. Again, no matter what I think of the story, I think Jeff Loeb's story was very poor. But Jim Lee's art was stellar. It generated a lot of merchandise and a lot of other pieces to it, and the art sold the story. The art sold the book, and you cannot deny it was successful. Hush has had extremely strong aftermarket numbers in trade, special editions movie, like I mentioned. And it was, now today, when you look at Hush, they promote it on the back of Jim Lee, far more than Jeff Loeb or anything else. Jim Lee, this is his masterpiece. This was his thing that he did with Batman. And I think it sets up, it would be hard to argue that if you did this again, or you even take an artist, I've advocated before for, put a Art Adams or a Todd McFarlane or a Brett Booth or somebody like that. You put them on for a 12-issue run of a title, and just do a showcase like this. You would see sales strengths. Don't reboot it. Don't relaunch it. Just promote it on the back of the artist. We live in an era of comics right now where the writer is promoted a lot more than the artist. But you look at this, things haven't particularly changed. I don't think you could have a credible argument right now to say, well, if you did the same thing today, it wouldn't be as big a deal because people don't care about the artists anymore. You put Jim Lee on 12 issues and you have him come out on time and you do this, you would see similar sales. Absolutely. Overall, I mean, Hush is a good thing. It's a good thing for DC. It's a good thing for comic fans. It's a good thing for the strength of the character. And I think it lays out a template. I mean, the only confusing thing to me is why comic publishers aren't trying this again, why they're not doing similar things. Obviously Jim Lee would go on to do the Superman series. That wasn't as successful. I'll do the numbers on that at some point, but still popular. And I think that this lays out a clear model of how you pull big sales, how you improve the strength of your titles over time, how you strengthen them even after the art team is gone. That, for whatever reason, comic publishers aren't listening to today. But anyway, there you go. There's a look at Hush. Let me know your thoughts, your questions. Leave them in the comments below. Like and subscribe. I know I'm supposed to do the like and subscribe at the beginning of the video. That's what the smart people do. But I always feel like somebody's going to hate hearing that over and over and over again if they listen to my videos regularly. So I always put it at the end, so I'm not bugging you. At this point, most people have dipped out, and that's okay. Anyway, follow me on social media. Send me an email. Thanks for listening.